Hello, one and all. Welcome back to another episode of the Hurdle Podcast. Got Luke here with me. No Logan today, but we are talking college football still. I'm gonna recap the Montana State game against Portland State last week. Look forward to any Big Sky games if there is any. I believe there's only 3 games this week. Nothing too crazy stakes in that. And then we got Luke here to talk Wazoo football. If there's really no one better in the world to talk Wazoo football with right now, so. Got him here to do that, and then we're going to go a little broader scope, a little CFB at the end. So getting into it here, Montana State beats Portland State 38-22. Really weird game, honestly. First half, it actually stayed pretty close, which was something I wasn't expecting. Our defense kind of gave up some weird third down conversions that we normally don't do getting to watch this game. But Sean was still Sean. Only 4 carries, which is really weird, but it seemed like we were a little pass happier this game, which I think is something that's actually kind of good to see. It's just weird how our defense kind of counterbalanced that, because normally when we run and we're chewing a lot of clock, defense gets a lot of rest in those scenarios. But we were a little more pass happy in this game. Didn't have a ton of, and we had some explosive plays, of course, but didn't have a ton of downfield attacks with the passing game. A lot of checkdowns that ended up being a really efficient day for Sean Chambers. 14 for 21, 143, 3 touchdowns, 118 yards on the ground on 4 carries and a touchdown. Of course, with that 88-yard run off the read option there in the second half that put us up 10, and that really was the spark that burst this game open. Defense held strong in the third quarter, and then it was kind of over from there. So not a ton of takeaways. We play Portland State. Who really cares? So we got to buy this upcoming week. We play Cal Poly the next week at a game at home, a game in which we'll win by a bajillion points, and then
Fighting Sam Hewards.
Yeah. So and then we got the tougher games off the road in Sacramento State, and then in Idaho against Idaho. So which Luke might be calling that game. So potentially. So tune into the radio station if he's calling over there. And just tune into the Washington State radio station as he gets to call for a top 13 team in the nation right now and a top 3 player in the nation right now, Karen Ward and the Washington State Cougars. And I really honestly want to do a deep dive here.
So we can do it. Just for that, when you say radio station, the place is just Facebook Live, just the Facebook page, because we use Facebook Live at the moment, which is KUGR Radio, whatever. We're calling the game against UCLA this Saturday. We'll be in Eugene calling the game in a couple weeks from now. It won't be me, but we'll also, obviously every WSU home game will be called. And then we'll also probably be calling the Apple Cup too, and depending upon funds, probably be calling a bowl game too. So check all that stuff out, but in any other sport too. But if you like anything WSU, I mean, it's a little bit more connected. We're not too far away from Montana, so
yeah,
whatever. And I'm not like, in case you're worried or something, I'm not like an Idaho fan or something like that. I don't know how the rivalry is between Idaho and Montana State, but I'm not like some Idaho fan that's like cares about Montana, like hates Montana State because I like Idaho or something. So that's not a thing. But anyways. No, yeah, WSU for sure. Playing UCLA this week, and we are 13th in the country. We are currently the 6th offense in terms of yards in the country. You're talking about a team that is 2nd in the country in passing yards per game, and is also a 3-point underdog on the road in a stadium in the Rose Bowl that is not going to be halfway full because nobody shows up to those games. So, it is what it is. I mean, it's kind of used to it. That's why there's all these slogans at WSU that like basically just mean that we don't think they don't think anyone respects them. We don't think anyone respects us. There's obviously all this college game day stuff that's been going on and whatnot. And so, kind of used to it. It is what it is. I don't take that much offense from it, and I don't want to get overhyped either. Like, I don't want WSU to get overhyped, because they have a tendency of, like, it's very well known on campus here, like, Couging it is a thing that happens every year. And so I don't want to get too overhyped and have something happen. The fun thing about this matchup is it's like a chance to kind of put that behind us because it's I don't know if you remember this game, Bailey. It's a rematch of
Mhm.
2019 when we lost to UCLA 67 to 63. Basically
The
blew like a
DTR
30.
game.
Yeah, basically blew like a. It was Anthony Gordon for WSU. Basically blew like a 36-point lead. It was just like
I do remember that game.
I watched that on a long road trip and it made it a lot longer. So yeah, I remember that game pretty vividly. But no, I can talk about anything. So I'll let
Okay.
you say what you want to talk
I'll
about
set the
this
stage
first.
then. Yeah, I'll set the stage. So, of course, the number one topic coming into just cringeably talking about Washington State is Cameron Ward. This dude is a bona fide superstar right now. Hasn't thrown a pick all year. 142 pass attempts. I believe this is week 5 of college football, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so they throw the pill a lot, and he's got a 75% completion percentage to go along with it. Almost 1,400 yards through 5 weeks. He's red hot. And to pair with that, you have a trio of receivers there that honestly rivaled the trio of receivers on the other side of the Cascades at UW. And um, when the Apple Cup rolls around, this game is going to be like 72 to 65 um, because none of these teams defensively are electric. But when we talk about Washington State's offenses, it's through the air, and they dominate through the air. 150, but it seems to stay pretty balanced. Granted, sacks go into rushing attempts in college football. So that's a weird stat that I wish they would just remove because it makes the carries to pass attempts ratio just look so off. Um, Especially with how pass heavy Washington State is. Teams like Washington are these upper level teams that are really throwing the pill. But Cam Ward is disgusting. So touch a little bit on where does Cam Ward separate himself from the rest of the pack and now put himself in a tier with Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, and how do the three receivers around him and Victor Kelly and Williams get him going?
Yeah, so Cam Ward, I mean, he's been receiving some hype even before the season. He was on like the Manning Award watch list, the Unitas Golden Arm Award watch list, Senior Bowl watch list, all this stuff. After the game against Oregon State, in case you didn't know, against Oregon State, where was he? He was on. Okay, so he finished that game and won the National Player of the Week. He won the awards that he won. The official awards that he won were the Walter Camp, Maxwell, Davy O'Brien, Earl Campbell, Reese's Senior Bowl, all of those awards. So he won all of those awards against Oregon State, who was a defense that came in allowing 11 points per game, one of the better defenses in the Pac-12 in the country up to that point. So
A big reason why
they,
they were
they
ranked coming into that game.
yeah, exactly. And so he did a lot and he's done a lot this season. And obviously he's third in passing in the country. He's got a completion percentage of 74.7%. You're talking about a guy that's attempted over 140 passes and has no interceptions. He basically leads the team in rushing every week. He doesn't rush a ton, but he like basically leads the team in rushing every week.
Leads the
He
team in
he's
carries.
he's been electric through the air, and the biggest thing about him is here's how he's improved the most so far this season. Against Colorado State, he missed like a 2 yard dump off wide open touchdown. Against Wisconsin, he missed one or two throws. Against Oregon State, he didn't miss throws. Like he just didn't miss any throws, and they were all dimes. On his deep ball to Kyle Williams on the first drive of the game, second play of the game, he hit him in stride 50 yards downfield. Like arm strength is there, placement is there, just the accuracy in general. He does have a little bit of a fumbling issue. He's fumbled a few
Mhm.
times. He's lost a few fumbles. He lost a fumble against Oregon State. He talks about it too. Like in his press conferences, he says consistently like he needs to get better at that. It's gotten better. He had lost two against Colorado State, and it got better until the last game. But a little bit of a fumbling issue, but other than that, not a big issue. And the accuracy has kind of gotten there. So separating, obviously, UCLA has a pretty solid defense, and Yeah, it's going to be in that department. He is obviously really good at extending plays. He moves around the pocket instead of like running out of the back of the pocket and basically running himself into trouble. Now he like actually steps up, steps out, steps through. Like he's running around to extend plays in a smart way, or
Hmm.
where he's not trying to look to run, but he will, but he's doing it in a smart way where he's not just running away from guys. He's actually trying to keep the play alive for his receivers who are making plays. So, um, he just has to I think he just has to continue to do it on a weekly basis, and if he continues to stack it up over and over and over again, then any slips from Williams or Penix kind of give him that opening. And then for his receivers, I mean, obviously you're missing Lincoln Victor, who is been big for WSU this season, but you're still talking about Kelly and Williams. The two transfers, Fresno State transfer Kelly and the UNLV transfer in Williams. Yeah. And then you got some other guys too. True freshmen, Carlos Hernandez, tight ends don't really get used, but it's whatever. So yeah, those guys just have to basically continue to do what they do. Williams is like the deep threat. Kelly is obviously like the route runner. You saw the amazing catches that he made last week. If you
Yeah.
didn't see them, just watch like the Sports Center top 10. He had the third ranked play. Just continue to make amazing catches, make him look even better than he is, which he's still like elite, but like he looks like
Yeah.
untouchably dominant when they're making plays like that. So yeah, basically just continue to make plays, and in the open field too, continue to get him rack yardage, juking out three guys with the one spin move, like things like that.
Hmm.
Continuing to get him rack yardage and make catches on balls that probably shouldn't be caught will continue to make him look better too. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you continue like the Heisman comparison, the top three right now are Penix, Williams, Ward. I think where you see Ward separating a little bit in the WSU tape I have watched, um, is when you watch Penix play, Washington is extremely structured in how they operate. There's not a ton of improvisation in that offense. It's McMillan, it's a Dunze, and it's the other Ward, I believe. Um, it's another Jalen. Um, the three receivers for UW, but they're consistently getting open. And when they play, it's extremely structured. And it makes the reads super easy for Penix. And it also makes the reads much easier when you have three guys at that level. When you talk about WSU, it's also incredibly structured, but there's more room for Ward to operate, in my opinion. There's more freedom when he goes out and gets outside of the pocket. He's more dynamic and elusive in those scenarios compared to Michael Penix. Michael Penix of old, maybe, but now he's torn an ACL, major knee surgery. He's a little slower. He's much more of a, he honestly kind of reminds me of like left-handed Big Ben, kind of sturdy in the pocket. He's going to find his reads. When we talk about Cam Ward, we're talking about much more of a dynamic athlete. Like you said, leads the team in carries. Granted, that's probably due to sacks. But in that fashion, you can see him use his athleticism a little more and improv. And like you said, when you're looking at improvisation from college quarterbacks, it's are they doing it in a smart fashion? Most of the time, the answer is honestly no. Um, that's what separates the average college quarterback to the elite college quarterback is you see guys like Caleb Williams when they get out of the pocket, they're almost more of a threat than they are when they're in the pocket. And I think Cam Ward absolutely describes that and how Washington State has shaped their offense with these three dynamic receivers. Of course, like you said, the loss of Victor, with these three dynamic receivers that can all get open at any moment. The reads are super simple, and if the reads aren't there, then it's Ward's time to take over. And what you see with this offense and really across the Pac-12 is just dynamic athleticism leading to high scoring, high volume, high possession games. That's partly why the numbers are insane, but that's why the three top players in college right now are three quarterbacks in the Pac-12. The numbers are just absurd to look at. So I think we're going to have a three-way race for the rest of the year when it comes to Cam Ward, um, Williams, and Penix. Anything you want to elaborate there?
Not necessarily in the quarterback situation. I think it should be mentioned in terms of kind of helping him look good. And a lot of it is him scrambling around more in a more educated fashion. But like the offensive line in that game against Oregon State. Oregon State came into that game, led the Pac-12 in sacks, and they gave up 1 sack. Like they were a lot better. The tight ends block more. He runs around. They run a lot of trick plays. Like last in
Mhm.
that game against Oregon State, they had two quarterbacks in the backfield. They ran a play act. They ran a read option where the backup quarterback is John Mateer. He hands it off to Cam Ward, who takes it going left, then wraps it around, and then throws it to the backup quarterback who's running a flat. Like you're talking about just wacko plays and like Cam Ward running in motion and then like quarterback draws with the backup quarterback. Like they have a new offensive coordinator. His name's Ben Arbuckle. Came from Western Kentucky. They were
Yeah,
second in passing last year. Now they're second in
Bailey
passing
Zappi.
this year at WSU. He's a really smart offensive quarterback for his style. Not so much of a running guy, more of a creative passing sort of thing. But like they just keep it really, really creative. All kinds of different formations, a lot of open, empty backfields, 5 wide. Occasionally they'll go a little bit heavier, it's pretty rare. And all these funky formations and trick plays, which Ward said they have more of too coming, so that should be fun to watch. Like they've had like Lincoln Victor threw a pass this year, like they've ran a fake punt, like they'll literally do anything. So makes it a little bit harder for defenses in that sense too. But from just a normal offensive structure, it's been a lot better, more structured. He's more comfortable. His weapons are better. His offensive line is better, and they've just been better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we were to draw an NFL comparison, you can tell me if you want to go a completely different direction with this. But I think I see a lot of Detroit in and how Washington State runs this offense. A lot of Ben Johnson, um, getting extra tackles in there for run support is something that Washington State does like to do. But in more of the ways that they use their wide receivers, guys like Amon Ra and Josh Reynolds, they're running crossers through the field, trying to get guys in space, and open space is opportunity for these players. You look at Miami, that's how they run their offense entirely. Is guys speed in motion, getting guys across the field moving, and it's just open opportunity, especially when teams play man. San Fran, they've been the leader in YAC for the past 4 or 5 years. There's a reason why. It's guys getting open with space, being able to create after the catch. And Washington State does that with the best of any team in America. Um, and how they run their offense and how it's structured. So, last thing I wanted to touch on there, defensively, it's a struggle. However, there's been improvement. I'm looking at the tackle list right now. Interesting enough, 3 of the top 5 tacklers on your team are DBs. But what is the approach that this Washington State team likes to take defensively? What changes are you hoping to see in the cup upcoming games? Because you're gonna have to draw USC at some point. You're gonna have to draw Colorado at some point, most
Not
likely.
USC. Not USC.
Not USC. Okay.
Oregon and Washington and
And
Colorado,
Washington.
yes. Yeah.
Washington's the
Um,
big one, of course.
yeah. No, they don't really blitz. It's usually like just a normal 4-man front. You're talking 2 D tackles, 2 edges. You're talking pretty much basically usually like one that they use the safety Jaden Hicks as kind of like a Jamal Adams prototype. Essentially, he's usually more down in the box. He can cover, but he's usually covering tight ends or running backs. Usually one high safety is Sam Lockett and 2 corners out there, and then you're talking, 1, 2 linebacker, like usually 2 linebackers at a time, 2 off-ball linebackers. Um, and like 2 traditional like defensive end edge rushers. We don't have like outside linebacker edge rushers, like they don't come off the ball.
Hmm.
Like they're always on the
Yeah.
ball. So yeah, and they're both 6th year seniors, both of these edge rushers, Ron Stone and Brennan Jackson. The corners situation is a little dicey. The number 1 corner is Shaw Smithwaite. He's been pretty solid. The backup corner position has rotated a lot. We've kind of used 3 or 4 different guys this year. It's been a little bit shaky, and it's very obvious like that they pick on that position over and over and over and over again, like DJU
Hmm.
was over and over and over again against Oregon State. Um, the middle linebackers are pretty good at tackling, like pretty solid tackling team, I would say. Especially the corners are actually better at tackling than you would think. Coverage is a little bit lackadaisical, and the pass rush is a slight struggle for sure. UCLA is not a very good offensive line. They gave up 7 sacks against Utah in their last game, and you're talking about a true freshman quarterback, 5-star Dante Moore. Like true freshman
Yeah.
quarterback, you can't allow that pressure. So hopefully you can capitalize there. That's basically what the defense does. The player to watch for is Jaden Hicks, just because he was one of the highest like PFF graded guys the first couple of weeks. He has a pick six. He's forced a fumble. He's made a bunch of plays in the backfield. He's pretty good in coverage. He like hits guys really, really hard, and he's a really good tackler. Like he's probably a top 5, 6 safety in this next year's draft class, like probably a second or third round pick. So he's like
Mhm.
the guy to watch for, but it's just as a unit, it doesn't it's okay. Like they'll make their share of plays, enough plays to let the
Mhm.
offense score more points, but they're not gonna like shut a team down. UCLA maybe, but
Yeah.
most teams no.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, you're seeing that across the Pac-12. A lot of high scoring games. So, with if you have a formidable defense at really any part or any level, you are competing in those games if your offense can keep pace. So, Washington State, of course, has one of the elite offenses right now in the Pac-12. That's why you're seeing them ranked 13th in the nation. And you previewed the UCLA game. So let's get into that. Is there anything else that we missed? Anything you want to cover? That you want to
I
talk
was
about?
just gonna I was just gonna say the offense that it kind of reminds me of is like the Saints, in that like our number one running back is more of like a scat back, and our backup quarterback is kind of like Taysom Hill. Like they just run him a lot, and he does a lot of stuff that's not throwing the ball. So that kind of
Mhm.
reminds me of that. They run a lot of Taysom Hill formations. So, but yeah,
Okay.
that's all I had. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's preview the UCLA game. So, um, Luke and the Washington State team are traveling to Los Angeles.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, he will be calling the game on Facebook Live at KU, KUGR.
KUGR. So like Cougar. KUGR.
Cougar. Like Hurdle, how we have Hurdle, HRDL, Cougar in that fashion.
Yeah.
Um, so they get to go to UCLA, like you mentioned, Dante Moore, the 5-star. 849 yards on the year, 8 touchdowns, 2 picks. UCLA, they are 3-1. Um, but when you look at their schedule, um, they got shut down by Utah last week. NC Central is not it. San Diego State is not it, and Coastal Carolina is not it. So they played one tough defense, which I think if any team in the Pac-12 is an exception, it's Utah. They have a trash offense when Cam Rising's not there, and they're heavily defensive based. They're really against the grain when it comes to the top Pac-12 teams. Um, but then it got beat up by Oregon State. So who Washington State just beat. So Washington State draws UCLA. UCLA somehow, though, is -3 coming into this game, which raises a lot of question marks for me. In terms of UCLA, granted they just played Utah, but and they held Utah to 14 points. But I think anyone could hold Utah to 14 points right now, and or Utah held UCLA to 7. I'm talking about defensively. UCLA held
UCLA
Utah to 14.
UCLA threw a pick six.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. That's fair.
So
So
they,
yeah,
they
they
did
started.
they did they did hold that really just atrocious non-Cam Rising offense to 7 points.
Yeah. Exactly. So point still stands. Um, I think this is another statement game for Cam Ward in this offense. When we look at how this game is going to shake out, it's going to be Washington State putting up a ton of points early. And I think if you're Wazoo, you want to come to this game and bury them like by halftime, if not halfway through the second quarter, is what you're looking to do. I mean, Dante Moore's a fine player, but there's no way in hell this Chip Kelly offense is going to keep up with this Western Kentucky style, Bailey Zappi 6,000-yard passing offense that you saw over the past couple years in Western Kentucky. Now it's transferring over to Washington State. It's working to perfection so far through 5 weeks. So they're undefeated coming to this game. I expect them to, or 4-0, excuse me. Um, They're undefeated coming into this game. I expect them to stay undefeated. Why UCLA is favored, mine is mind-boggling in my opinion. Washington State should win this game by double digits.
Yeah, UCLA has been pretty good stopping the run this year, which is why they've had so much success even against the bad, Utah offense, because that offense without Rising can't throw the ball, and then a bunch of bad
Yep.
teams. Laiatu Latu's really good on UCLA. The edge rusher, he had 10.5 sacks last year, 4 so far this year, and he's like a top 20 draft prospect. He's really good.
Yep.
So he'll be something to watch. But offensively for UCLA, they don't do a lot. They kind of run the ball okay. They didn't run the ball well against Utah. Obviously, Dante Moore was sacked 7 times against Utah. And like even in that Coastal Carolina game, I just watched like the game tape on it just in preparation, and like they threw 3 interceptions between the two quarterbacks. 2 of them were not on the quarterbacks. It's because they were literally getting smoked as they threw the ball and it like flipped up in the air. But that just continues to show like their offensive line isn't that special. Their running game is fine. They have like Dante Moore is really, really talented, but he also has like no time to throw and he does make freshman mistakes. So that's kind of what it's going to be, like more veteran style defense against a true freshman and a bad offensive line. So as talented as his arm is and his athleticism is there as a 5-star, he does have to go through that. It's kind of like the equivalent to like Bryce Young on the Panthers, essentially. Really talented,
Mhm.
not really any weapons or an offensive line. So
Gotcha. So you completely agree with Washington State double digits.
I would
Oh my
predict
gosh.
Washington State to win. I never like to predict Washington State by double digits against a decent team. Like UCLA is receiving the 4th most votes, so they're essentially like number 29. But
Yeah.
I never like to predict them to win by too much, just because I know Washington State has a tendency to like give up a lot of points late, regardless. Like they gave up even in the
Mhm.
blowout wins over Colorado State and Northern Colorado, they gave up like all the points in like the last half of the 4th quarter. So
Mhm.
they struggle to close out games. So we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. So now we're going to broaden out. This is where we're going to kind of expand the scope here on Washington, outside of Washington and Montana State. We're going to talk about a couple of the big games this week. Um, would you like to go Texas first or Texas last?
Uh, go last.
Okay. That means we're doing Maryland, Ohio State.
Okay.
Um, both teams are undefeated. This game is being played in Columbus, Ohio. Um, Ohio State has been really puzzling for me this year. Maryland 5-0, Ohio State 4-0. I think the spread on this is 20 points in favor of Ohio State. So
Yeah, 19 and a half.
19 and a half. So um, what some weird things going on with Ohio State this year. This is the first year, and I don't know how many years, maybe since Braxton Miller, where they haven't had a supremely elite quarterback. Um, even their backups, when Braxton Miller got hurt, JT Barrett could play, and Cardale Jones could play really high level college football. So um, this is the first year I've had kind of this weird feeling out process with Ohio State. Normally, I'm all over Ohio State because it's like there's enough talent defensively where they can push through, but the offensive talent is just what wears people out. You saw that with the Stroud game against Georgia last year, a game that they should have won. They should have beat Georgia last year in that college football playoff game. And you saw the offense was just relentless with MHJ, Marvin Harrison Jr., Stroud, and is it Amelia? Is it Ubeka? Is that how you pronounce it?
Egbuka.
Buka, thank you. And then Henderson, of course, as their running back. He's been their prolific running back for the past couple of years. This year is a whole different story. I don't think McCord's an elite quarterback by any standards, and you saw that really show in the Notre Dame game. The offense was lackadaisical. It was stagnant, and granted, MHJ was out for a decent portion of that game, but Amelia should have been able to find those spots when they needed to, and he needs to be able to fill that role because he's honestly Marvin Harrison Jr. is clearly the best receiver in the league or in the nation, and Ubeka should be 2, probably on that list. So they have the top two receivers basically in the nation, but their quarterback play is limiting their ability to expose it, to emphasize those strengths. Whereas last year, in the last few years of watching Ohio State play, they've been able to exercise those weapons to max abilities. You're talking Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, these kind of guys, Terry McLaurin, um, all those pro level receivers that we're seeing kind of take over the league right now. So, um, and then Maryland comes into this game at 5-0. They got Tua's younger brother who's been playing there for a couple years now. He's heavily integrated into the system, and he's playing phenomenal football so far through this year. And they're undefeated. And granted, they've actually played like halfway decent competition. I know drawn Michigan State at Michigan State, won that game very handedly, drew Indiana, which isn't much of anything, but they're playing middling at least D1 schools, and they're handling them with relative ease. Now, Ohio State is an entirely different level than Michigan State. When Ohio State plays Michigan State this year, they're probably going to win by 40. But this game is raising a lot of question marks just because of this discrepancy of quarterback play, which is why I think this game will stay under the 20-point spread. But I do think Ohio State still wins.
I'm totally with you. I definitely think Ohio State's going to win. I haven't seen enough from Big Ten competition outside of Michigan or Penn State in a long, long time to think that anyone could beat them. But like Maryland, like if there was a team that could do it, maybe Maryland could do it. I mean, here's the thing. It's always dangerous to talk in like really like deep like when you're really digging for like these hypothetical situations where you can compare teams. Like, yeah, did Maryland beat Indiana in much more impressive fashion than Ohio State? Yeah. But does that mean they're better? No. Like not necessarily unless they actually beat them, right? So yes, they played Virginia, Michigan State, and Indiana. They're all terrible, but they are all Power Five schools, and they destroyed each one of them, which is what they're supposed to do. If you're a ranked team, you destroy those schools. So they did that. Good job doing that. Now you actually have to like win this test, and it's on the road, which makes it way, way tougher. Talia Tagovailoa historically has not really been good in prime time, like big time games. He's been
He
impressive this
struggled
season, but
mightily.
yeah, really struggled in big time games. But uh, I mean, here's the thing, like Ohio State is allowing under 9 points a game. Like their defense is just disgusting. Not really a heavy pass rush team. They more just wear you down. Like they haven't had more than 2 sacks in a game this year. They didn't have any sacks against Notre Dame. So it's not really through pass rush that they do it. They stop the run, they stop like they just kind of shut you down. They don't do it in big flashy ways. They just kind of shut you down. And so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Maryland, the thing about them is like they did give up like 17 to Indiana, 14 to Virginia. So maybe Ohio State can move the ball. Like they really need to. Like they have to move the ball at
Mhm.
some point. They really probably shouldn't have won that game against Notre Dame, right?
They shouldn't
Like
have.
they ran the last 2 plays of the game on the goal line against 10 defenders. Like they probably shouldn't have, if they wouldn't have had that huge play right at the end to set them up with that, they wouldn't have won the game. Like they shouldn't have won that game, but it was on the road against a top 10 team, so it's whatever. But
Yeah.
I just think it's an interesting game. I personally believe Maryland should have been the 25th team instead of Louisville. Like I think this should have been a ranked matchup. Just don't think we'll talk.
Yeah.
We might talk about it later, but I don't think Louisville's very good. I think Maryland has actually like impressively handled lower level competition, and so that's why they deserve the spotlight and a chance, with Gus Johnson to go out there and play
Mhm.
against Ohio State and maybe try and do something. And if they keep it close, if Maryland keeps it close, if you look at their schedule, like yeah, they play Penn State and Michigan, they should win all the other games. Like they could have a really, really good season. But if they win one of those 3 games, it'll be like a season from the heavens. Like if they can win one of
Mhm.
those 3 games. But
Yep.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Maybe like Ohio State is a sleeping giant and now they're like awake. Who knows?
Mhm. Yeah, I think you made a great point about the defense of Ohio State coming into this game. They're a bend but don't break style defense. They aren't doing it in the ways of pure dominance how they have in the past couple years. Chase Young, Marshawn Lattimore, elite NFL talent that they've had on the defensive side of the ball, really for the past decade now. This is probably one of the lesser talented Ohio State teams I've watched in the past few years outside of the top two receivers, but Ohio State is WRU. They have the best wide receiver core year after year after year after year. You can go straight down the line. They're number one, really outside of the Bama year with Smith and Waddle. So, yeah, I think you made a great point. They shouldn't have won that Notre Dame game. And I picked Notre Dame to win that game, so it pissed me off severely. But and watching Ohio State win that game, they struggled offensively, but their defense has fortitude and integrity. And I think when we look at the scope of it, while Ohio State may not be a top four talent-wise team, they are playing top four football right now, in my opinion. Even with the offense struggling, even with the defense not being as talented, they do not let up points. It's field goal after field goal after field goal. And limiting teams to threes instead of sevens is something that is going to be so big coming into CFP games, because Georgia is not how they were the past 2 years. Georgia is not this almighty defense with a winner that they had at quarterback, and just the rest of the team is just literally one of some of the best college football players we've ever seen. And there's really no team that's going out and getting it. There's no elite Bama this year. Texas is back on the map this year, and it's the first time they've been there, and probably since like Colt McCoy, basically. So watching the landscape of football kind of shift, even though Georgia's still the number one seed this year, Ohio State has a clear advantage. I think if they had Stroud this year instead of McCord, they'd be the one seed. They'd be putting up ridiculous numbers. So the timing is off, which sucks for Ohio State. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they draw Michigan in that big game again this year. I think it's going to be very telling, because I don't know if both those teams make it into the CFP this year. And maybe we'll discuss that a little bit at the end.
Yeah.
Anything to add there?
Yeah, if we're gonna talk about that at the end, I don't have anything to add on that. No, I agree. It's just the quarterback position has been fine enough to win with the defense, but like once you start to get to those big games, college football playoff games, you need more. Like he has to be able to do things, make throws, make certain plays in certain moments that like NFL level quarterback can make. It's just the facts. And so if he plays like he's played this season, which is fine enough of a game manager to win the game, then it's just not going to cut it. So we'll see. Maybe this is like his chance. We'll see.
Absolutely. So speaking of Georgia, we're going to go to the Kentucky-Georgia game. Georgia, as I just said previously, is not the Georgia of the past 2 years. This is not back-to-back national championship Georgia. This is not. We had basically our entire starting lineup off the defensive side of the ball go to the NFL Georgia. These are not those teams. The offense isn't as explosive or elusive or electric in any of those fashions. But the defense, in my opinion, isn't as nasty as it was the last 2 years. Last 2 years, you were dealing with Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. We're talking first-round elite NFL talent across the front seven. And they had elite secondary players to go with that. Kelee Ringo comes to mind. When we say those kinds of guys. So, and Kentucky's red hot right now. They're 5-0. They're playing insane football. Their running back in the Florida game, they just beat ranked Florida, which is why they're ranked coming into this game. They're ranked 20 coming to this game against Georgia. Ray Davis has like a legacy game, 280 yards, 4 tuds. And that's the big thing about this Kentucky offense. They've had to switch their entire offensive profile the last couple of years with Will Levis. They've been very pass happy and trying to exploit Levis's arm downfield, stuff like that. This year, they're a little more run-oriented, and I think it's honestly kind of balanced them out in a nice fashion. So they beat Florida at home. Outside of that, there's really not much to say. They haven't played anyone else outside of Florida. But Florida had looked impressive in games prior to the Kentucky matchup. So for them to draw Georgia at this point in time, it's a really weird feeling, especially with Georgia coming off that catastrophe of an Auburn game. I know they won. That was a really weird game. to watch and experience. And Georgia's been banged up for most of the year. They don't have top players. I know their star receiver, it's like McConkey or something like that. He's been banged up to start the year. And it's just like there isn't much consistency and fluidity when they've had so much turnover go to the NFL. I do think Georgia still wins this game, but I do think it might be closer than some people are expecting it to be. That happened to me last week with Auburn. I had Georgia beating Auburn by a crap ton of points. And you're kind of watching that game, and the realization settles in that this is not Georgia from 2021. So, opinions on Georgia coming into this game against Kentucky?
Yeah, Georgia is been a little sketchy. They this year they've definitely dominated the lower level competition, but like
Of course.
they did give up they gave up 21 to UAB. Last year they wouldn't have given up a point. Like
No.
they were like up by like 7 at halftime against UAB. They were down for most of the South Carolina game, beaten by 10 points. Like struggled in the first half against Ball State and Tennessee Martin before they just clicked it into gear in the second half. They just have not been able to get off to a good start this whole season. And they have a really, really easy schedule, essentially, especially in the beginning, which is really good for them because, they have time to figure it out. But
Yep.
like Kentucky, I don't know if they're not like an amazing team, but they do certain things well. And I mean, I'm just waiting for a team to catch them. And Auburn is not very
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
Auburn beat what Cal by like 13 to 10 or something like that. I don't remember, but it was like a really brutal
That was
game.
correct. It was a
They
trash game.
scored they scored a lot more against Georgia than they did against Cal. The, Kentucky Kentucky is a pretty solid team. Ray Davis is just unreal. Like 600 yards essentially this year, 8 touchdowns. He's averaging 8 yards a carry on 76 carries. Like
Yeah.
Devin Leary was supposed to be good. He's not good. Devin Leary's terrible, but um, running the ball is where they can do things. Here's the thing about Georgia. They only give up 173 passing yards a game. They actually do give up 113 rushing yards per game against, Auburn and a few other teams that are not even in the same like stratosphere as Georgia. So I think that maybe Kentucky, because like Georgia seems to be struggling more against the run than the pass, could actually potentially break out in this game for that reason. I was worried that maybe they might struggle because Leary's struggled and they couldn't run the ball. But when I did some more research and found out Georgia actually struggles against the run, it's like, well, and the thing like
Weakness.
Kentucky's defense is fine. I don't know. It's not special. They give up like 15 points a game. Florida didn't do anything, but they're not a great offense. I mean,
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to see. Georgia's offense is up and down. Brock Bowers is great. He's like the Travis Kelce of college football, but Carson Beck, their quarterback, isn't great. He's fine. He's kind of like uh he's kind of like Stetson Bennett without the winning gene. Like
Mhm.
he's like the same kind of like production, but he doesn't just like make the plays. He just kind of is
Yeah.
there. But when he gets it to Brock Bowers, they do fine in the end of the game, and they've ended up winning these games. Who knows? They might just sneak all these games out all year long, but like I think it could be a game that they genuinely I do think that they could lose this game just because of this dude Ray Davis. If this dude Ray Davis like gets a high ankle sprain, then they'll probably walk
Mhm.
away with it pretty easily. But like maybe Ray Davis will carry them to victory. It could be like the Ray Davis versus Georgia game.
Mhm. Yeah. I think coming out of this game, there's going to be some really interesting storylines because it's either Georgia thrashes Kentucky in this game, and it's like maybe Georgia's starting to find their footing a little bit, which I don't think is personally going to happen in this game. I think you brought up some great points about really the lack of run defense in Georgia this year, which is something that was not even a thought over the past 2 years when guys like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are hitting your front four. Um, the teams didn't even consider running the ball against that front seven. You were just passing it 50 times a game and praying to God you could keep up with their offense and just not turn the ball over. Um, and in this fashion, Georgia doesn't get as many turnovers. There's some kinks in the armor there that weren't there the past couple years. So um, then the other storyline is if Kentucky plays within their realm or even beats them, it's what the hell is going on with Georgia, right? So um, and is Georgia really even a top four team? The CFP this year, I think, is going to be insane because I think there's three Pac-12 teams that could potentially contend, at least two at a minimum, if not three. There's multiple Big Ten teams. There's one, maybe two SEC teams. Like the distribution is weird this year. So normally it's you got your guaranteed Bama, Georgia. Most likely you're guaranteed between Michigan, Ohio State, and then the fill or fourth team that's going to get blown out. This year it's completely different. I mean,
And one
we've had a
ACC
year
team.
and one ACC team. Yep. Um, and and we've even had years with three SEC teams where we had the LSU, LSU Bama. I don't believe Georgia made it that year, so I'm mistaken in saying that. But you also had Clemson in there normally, and it's just like some of the powerhouses are falling down the rankings. That's really shifting the landscape. So I think Georgia's also really lucky this year that Bama isn't elite. Bama's not an elite team here this year, and we're going to touch on this game against Texas A&M where they're favored by one, going to the freaking biggest stadium on the planet.
Yep.
There at Texas A&M at College Station, hold 102,000 people, and Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher has been Bama's kryptonite the past 2 years. Really close game to last year, in which Bama won on a final second defensive play, and then unranked A&M beat Bama when they were the 1 seed last year on a game-winning field goal. I believe it was like Seth Small or something like that kicked it in. So, and when we look at Alabama this year, their quarterback position is their clear weakness. Defensively, Alabama is disgusting. This might be one of the better. They lose Will Anderson. I honestly think this defense it might be better than last year's defense, even with the loss of Will Anderson. And Saban is having to coach his ass off this year for the offense to produce any amount of anything because there was a severe lack of talent, which was not there over the past few years. Last few years has been Devonta Smith, Mac Jones, Jalen Waddle, classic Bama. These last couple years, though, now you strip away Bryce Young as the number one pick, and his offense is in the gutter right now, and they really struggled. I watched, I believe it was UAB or UCF, one of the two, or USF, excuse me, USF. And that game was a struggle to get through. They removed Milroe, which we talked about 2 weeks ago after the game happened. I think removing Milroe was a huge mistake there because even though they lose to Texas by 10, I don't honestly think the offense was the problem. They just couldn't get a freaking stop when they needed it. And Quinn Ewers and that Sarkisian offense is electric. He's fantastic. I would have rather seen them bounce back with Milroe in an unranked game, get the confidence back up. But now he's going to these ranked games. Granted, they just beat Mississippi State by 23. They beat a ranked Ole Miss. Not in dominating fashion, though. These are not in Bama-style fashions. 5 years ago, Bama would have beat a middle-ranked team by 40 points. That's how those games would have went down. When they played those Kiffin Ole Miss teams a couple years ago with Jones and Waddle and those guys, right after Kiffin left, they were laying the smack down on those teams. And they're not doing it anymore. So this is going to be a really close game. Bama's favored by 1. I think I'm going to pick Bama, but I could easily see A&M winning this game. And A&M's had their own QB thing going on now that I believe it's Wagman's out for the year, is what I'm understanding. So now they got Max Johnson, the kid they had last year on the transfer for LSU 2 years ago, if I'm correct in saying that. And now they have a new look to this offense, but Max Johnson played a terrific game last week. So what are your thoughts? What are you looking for coming into this Bama A&M game?
Yeah, it's pretty clutch that Johnson is there because you lose your quarterback and you expect like you're done for, but then they pretty
Yeah.
handedly beat Auburn and Arkansas even after losing their main guy there. But I mean, Johnson, he was fine at LSU a couple years ago. He's been fine this year. He hasn't been terrible. I mean, he's completing like 63% of his passes, like 155 QBR. He's not horrible. We'll see how he does. It'll be tough for them. They're gonna have to find a way to run the ball, which hasn't been great for teams this year.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I think Milrow, I think like the common rumor was like that he was out for disciplinary reasons against USF because like there's
Mhm.
no way that at some point when you're playing USF, which is like very, very inferior athletes on the field, that you're not saying we cannot throw the ball. Just put Milrow in and don't even throw the ball. Just let Milrow run around and he'll run for 200 yards or whatever. Like he doesn't
Mhm.
do that against like really good teams, but like against like USF, he'd be able to do that. So I think it's probably something like that. But they're definitely better with Milrow in there just because of the athleticism the other guys don't have. I don't think any of them
Yeah.
are special passers or NFL level quarterbacks at this point, for
No.
sure. For sure, not at this point. Even with like Simpson, who's a five-star freshman or whatever, like maybe he'll develop into something, but definitely not right now. Milrow is not really a deep passer. When he throws the ball, it just kind of looks like he's like trying really, really hard to throw it deep. Like it looks like he's
Yeah.
really trying hard. Like it's not just easy for him. His
He
accuracy
doesn't
isn't
care what the
great.
first read is,
His
as long as it's
accuracy is
a
not,
post.
yeah, his accuracy is not very good. Milrow's game is like play action boot and then throws it on the run to like a crosser, something like that. But that, I mean, it's fine. You mentioned Texas A&M kind of having their number, and it being at home for Texas A&M is huge. Um, I think that it'll be interesting to see what Alabama does offensively from a scheme perspective. What Milrow can do. Whether they're just, I'm surprised they don't run more with Milrow. It's been pretty surprising.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I can't in my right mind pick A&M to win this game. It just feels off. Like A&M, other than the Bama game last year, they just don't like win big games. They don't really like win games in general. They gave up like 48 points to Miami this year. Like, but they could do it just out of spite,
Mhm.
just out of like SEC rivalry. It's definitely possible, but I'd pick Alabama, not confidently. I probably wouldn't bet on it. Could be a really low scoring game. Could be a really
It
low
could be.
scoring game, especially with backup. You're talking backup quarterback for A&M, backup level quarterbacks for Bama. So yeah, it's like it could be a really low scoring game. I think it probably will be, but yeah.
Uh, yeah, completely agree. And I believe the last game on our list, we just mentioned the man Quinn Ewers in Texas is at home in the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma. Um, Matchup predictor on ESPN's telling me Oklahoma is going to win this game. I'm going to defer and I'm going to pick Texas in this game for a couple reasons. I mean, Oklahoma's offense has had a massive change this year. I believe they brought in Garrett Riley, um, younger brother of Lincoln Riley, um, to kind of come in and give this offense some life. And you've seen five-star Dylan Gabriel take that next leap, something he never did at UCLA. So transferring from there into Oklahoma gets to go into more of a pro-style offense, and he's been fantastic. 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, 2 picks. They've already thrown the ball 160 times this year. They're putting up I wouldn't say Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts level numbers, but they are putting up numbers. Like this is like 85 to 90% of what Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts were doing there at Oklahoma. But Quinn Ewers is the man. I think we saw it in the Bama game. He delivers in the big games. And this Sarkeesian offense right now with Xavier Worthy, who's the top 5 receiver in the nation currently, um, they're they're running on all cylinders. So I kind of expect Sarkeesian to come through and smooth over um, this Oklahoma defense. Oklahoma's not really ever known for their defense, but that's becoming more prominent in terms of Oklahoma over the last couple of years because now they have. Did they hire Clemson's DC from 2 years ago? I'm trying to remember how they tell this podcast. they hired a defensive coordinator from what I do remember, but so they bring in him, and then Riley's kind of just the offensive coordinator, Garrett. Um, and that you've seen a nice transition. Correct, Clemson's older DC. Um, so you've seen a nice transition there. Offensively, they had to take that 1 year hiatus where Riley was kind of building up the program. They lost all that talent. They lost so much talent to Lincoln Riley and USC. I mean, Jordan Addison, Caleb Williams, literally the biggest players in college football last year, they missed out on because of the loss of Lincoln Riley. So they had to take a little short 1 year hiatus, but it seems like Oklahoma is getting back to where they once were a couple years ago, competing for CFB position. They look really good, but as does Texas. I think Texas is a legit CFP contender this year. I think they're back on the map. And I really like Quinn Ewers as a prospect. So I am going to take Sarkisian in this offense.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I think two much more balanced teams, like kind of all around
Yeah,
than some of these games we're talking about. Like this team, like Washington State can only throw, Kentucky can only run, blah blah blah. These are really two balanced teams. Like you're looking at like Oklahoma, like runs for like over 150 yards, throws for over 350 yards, and like Texas is running for 190 yards and almost 290 passing yards. Both defenses haven't been too bad either. I think that the biggest standout factor to me here is Texas defensively is actually giving up less passing and rushing yards in both categories, and they've like played some definitely better competition. You know, you're talking about Alabama, you're talking about Kansas, who was ranked at the time, had some decent play before that. And then, you know, like Baylor's not good, but they're like the same level as like Cincinnati or Iowa State, which Oklahoma's played. So like
hmm
definitely better competition so far for Texas. They're more tested, you know, in all of those aspects. It's at home for Texas, which is huge. And they're pretty healthy. So Xavier Worthy, you know, you're talking about Ewers has been awesome. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that I'll also just say right now I'll probably pick Texas just because of those factors, being at home, the better resume, more tested, like but this is a game that like Oklahoma could totally win. Like
absolutely.
they have a high enough octane passing offense to keep up even if they fall behind. I think that they're also well rounded enough that I think they could play from ahead too. So it's not like there's a scenario where one team is screwed. There's not a side of the ball where one team is screwed. So well, it's not completely even. It's pretty close to even as the rankings would say. And so
hmm
I think 5.5 might be a little heavy for me in terms of Texas. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
I think it might be a one possession, like right down to the wire sort of game here. So
definitely.
could be one of those ones where last team with the ball wins. I think Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma's better than Alabama in my opinion. Maybe not defensively,
hmm
but I think that their offense is so much better than Alabama's that it just makes them better, just because of how productive they are offensively. So it's going to be a bigger challenge in my opinion for Texas in that standpoint, but because it's at home and not on the road like it was against Alabama, I don't know. I think that plays a big factor too. So I'll pick Texas as well. But yeah,
hmm
very possible. Which is funny that we didn't mention these two teams in our college football playoff thing when we were talking when we were like just naming teams by conference because actually
hmm
the SEC does have technically more contenders because like these two
Yeah,
teams, but you know, it's whatever. Like
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
The
The old
conference
West.
changes is killing me. It's killing me.
Yeah.
Um, I agree with you on a lot of points there. I think this could be a classic Red River rivalry, like going back to like the 2007 2008 range, where you got like the Colt McCoys against the Sam Bradford games, and Adrian Peterson being in those games. I think this could hit those levels because there's huge playoff implication in this game. If Texas wins this game handedly, you could see them jump to one, in my opinion, with how
They
poor
probably
Georgia
will.
has looked. They probably will, right? So, or maybe Michigan would rise up to one, and then you'd see Texas take two. Um, But
But
I think if they win this game outright by double digits, it's a 1 seat in line for Texas.
yeah, and barring some kind of Texas collapse like we've seen, and this is clearly a different team, but like once you get past Oklahoma, you have a bye week, and then you just don't have losable games. Like there's no more ranked opponents. It's like Kansas State is like your best opponent, TCU, which isn't very good, like not a great schedule for them. Oklahoma has Kansas, but like the Big 12 is terrible right now. So there's just not really anybody else to challenge. So like if whichever team wins this game is probably going to be a playoff team. And like here's the thing. If Texas loses this game, they could very well still make it
Mhm.
because of the win over Bama and then just going undefeated and destroying teams. And then, for Oklahoma, if they win this game, they'll have a very, very realistic shot at making the playoffs, barring some kind of collapse. So if this is an Oklahoma win, I could even see these two teams making the playoffs dependent upon some other factors. Um, Oklahoma loses is a little bit dicier, especially if they lose close, maybe, but
Yeah,
it'll be hard for them. It'll be hard for them to be like 13, 14 and climb up with the remaining schedule they have. But if they
they'd
win,
have to
they
dominate
definitely
on their
could.
way to win out, and
Yeah,
they would have to ask for a couple top teams to lose. It's kind of what they'd be asking for. There'd be
exactly.
no
So the
graciousness.
so the Bama thing is like the huge difference in the schedules, but like, you know,
Hmm.
pretty
Yeah,
close though.
absolutely. I think one other thing when talking about Texas, um, a huge question coming into the year was how is the run game going to look without Bijan? Because Bijan was
Mm.
so electric and so dynamic. There's a reason he was a top 10 pick. And Jonathan Brooks is fantastic. He's an unbelievable running back. I mean, he's almost at 100 carries on the year already, which shows how balanced this Sarkisian offense is. It's something I can't stress enough. Being able to have that run game at the college level takes so much stress off your quarterback. When it packs more in the box and you still have a top five receiver in Xavier Worthy, it's super important. So almost 100 carries on the year, 7 yards to carry, 5 touchdowns. With this run game being as potent as it is, it takes a lot of stress off yours. So something that was a huge question coming into the year with Texas has actually turned out to be a massive strength of their offense. Has really helped balance them out, which is fantastic for them. So segment at the end. Anything to add? We're gonna add something.
The only thing I was gonna add is in case you're listening and you're like, hey, there's like other ranked matchups, why aren't you talking about it? Um, Let me just say my prediction is Missouri because LSU's not very good, and my prediction is Notre Dame because Louisville shouldn't be ranked. They're just not a very good team. They're beating lesser teams, but they're not a very good team.
Yep. Okay. Here's the segment. If the season ended today, right now, who are the 4 teams that you would put through? Are they the top 4 ranked? Or I think there's an actual pretty definite mix. Just because I don't think Georgia's playing their best football right now, and I don't know if I would put Ohio State in. But there's this weird group. There's no clear number 1 seed this year, in my opinion. But there's this weird meld once you get out of the top 3. I think I would say once you get past Texas, Ohio State down between about 4 and 10. I could see maybe even 4 and 12 with Oklahoma being there. I could see any of those teams making it. Um, Later on down the line, it's just how our team's going to punch each other out of these spots. Um, so your 4 teams right now that you would, if the season ended today, who would you pick?
Yeah, my number one team is probably Texas right now. Just because the resume, the impressive win over Bama, the really, really dominant win over Kansas.
Yeah,
And so I just think they're the most impressive and the most well-rounded team. I'm probably the most confident right now in their actual playmakers. And I definitely think Quinn Ewers is probably the best quarterback out of like the top 5 schools right now. Because you're talking
I agree.
about Carson Beck, JJ McCarthy, McCord, and Travis. Travis is good, but Quinn
Mhm.
Ewers is my top quarterback in the top 5. So I'm taking him. Um, and also I'm just wondering, are you saying like based off what's happened this year, or like predicting like with what is going to go on the rest of the year?
It could be whatever your criteria may be. I said if there's no remaining games on the schedule, you wipe away the rest of the games. Your four favorite teams going into the second half of the year.
Right, because I think some things are going to happen that are going to make some of the teams I want to pick up rise right now. But like, it's
Of
obviously
course.
harder to say like the number 9 team is a top 4 team. But I think like by the end of the year, some of these teams will probably prove it. So I definitely have Texas. My second best team is Michigan because I think they're probably going to. I'm pretty confident they're going to beat Penn State and Ohio State. I just think they're
Me too.
better. And I think the Big Ten champion is going to be in. I don't know if there will be two Big Ten teams, but I think the Big Ten champion will be in. I think it's Michigan right now. I just think they're the best team in the
Agree.
conference. Um, and then my third team is Georgia, just because they haven't done anything to like say don't put them in yet. Like they haven't been like crazy impressive, but as long as they don't lose, it's whatever. They'll probably figure it out a little bit more just thanks to their coaching. So I think they'll be fine. Especially
Mhm.
with, their easier schedule. But like right now, I think they're probably fine. And I don't think there's anything to tell me like to take them out yet. And then
Yep.
4 is like a toss up because I'm weighing it up between. I'm thinking Texas is better than Oklahoma, so I'm not putting them up there. But I'm thinking like the 3 Pac-12 teams: UW, Oregon, USC, and then I'm looking at
Yep.
like Florida State is like my other one. Now,
Hmm.
Florida State almost probably should have lost to Boston College. So
Hmm.
I'm not putting them in. Like that was like they could win games
And they
and
almost
make it
lost. They
in.
should have lost to Clemson too.
Yeah, they really haven't done anything super impressive. And it's also telling now too that LSU is just not very good.
Yep.
So I think my number 4 team is probably this is a really tough pick. Washington was not impressive against Arizona. I probably go with Oregon. Oregon. I'll say
Hmm.
Oregon is 4.
Oregon.
I think what they did to Colorado with the whole hype train and whatever, like they really just dominated them. USC
Yeah.
let them creep back. Oregon just
Hmm.
killed them the whole time, start to finish. So that's the separator there. And the separator with Washington and Oregon was just Washington struggling a little bit. I think Oregon's more well-rounded
Yep.
defensively and their running game. I think they're a little bit more well-rounded. Washington could beat them because Penix is good enough, but I think that Oregon's a little more well-rounded. So I'd probably go Texas, Michigan, Georgia, Oregon.
Okay. Um, I have my one. I have your 1 and 2 flop. So I would have Michigan at 1, Texas at 2. I think right now Michigan is playing the best football. I agree that Texas. If we come out of this Oklahoma game even slightly positive, um, as in Texas by more than one score, they're going to be the number 1 seed after this week. But I think just going into this week, the way Michigan has kind of just manhandled competition so far, even though they're clearly subpar, but they're doing what they're supposed to against those teams, that would vault me to 1 there, Texas 2, but that could easily flip after this week, depending on how that game goes. Okay. This is where it gets incredibly interesting for me. I do not think Georgia's that good. I think Georgia is, um, I overrated would be a word, but that's not a stretch. I think I almost think their expectations were too high coming into the season, and they're underperforming to what the last couple of years of what their level really was, because their talent was so good on those teams that it's kind of just like this weird slope down for them. So I don't know where to put them at 3. I agree with you about all the 3 Pac-12 teams. They all have a legit chance. The thing is, I love USC. I think USC's offense is just ungodly. Like it is so absurd to watch them play football and how Caleb Williams plays. When Caleb Williams plays, his pocket presence is out of this world. He sees things on the field that are going to happen, and he anticipates them before they actually do happen, which makes him the best quarterback in college football right now, arguably between him and Penix. I think Caleb Williams is clearly more talented than Penix. Um, but if we're just talking about stats this year and how they've been playing, Penix is right there in that conversation. I do not think Penn State is a top 6 team. personally, their defense is insane, but offensively they just don't impress. And same thing with Florida State. I totally agree with what you said. The LSU win is now so far downgraded. Granted, LSU's offense is pretty electric, but defensively they're a disaster. And you've kind of seen it. I mean, they're 3-2 already on the year. They have no chance in hell to make the playoff. So, um, Ohio State is the legend in this, and then I'm between Ohio State, Georgia, and one of the Pac-12 teams. Yeah, I do think Notre Dame is really good. I think they have a legit chance. I honestly think they're, if we're barring record, they're a top 6 team in college football right now, maybe 7. Just because I don't think Ohio State is fantastic, and I do not think Florida State is that good. So even with that loss on the resume, it's a top 4 team in college football. I think they legit. If I was to legitly rank and give a vote, I'd probably have them at 5, honestly, or really high up there. So in that 5 to 7-ish range. So at 3, I'm gonna go Washington. I think when it comes to the big time games, and it's really weird because you can say this about the Oklahoma teams of the past couple of years, USC last year, really just the Lincoln Riley offenses, how his teams are structured. The offense is so potent, but the defense is so trash that it can't, like, even as good as the offense is, they still can't keep pace with even the 10th or 15th best offense because they're giving up points every damn drive. So if you have one drive that stalls in those games, instantly you're down 10 to 14 points, and it's a complete tonal shift of the game, and you're just forcing then from there on out. Which is why I don't have USC in my top 4, because that end of the game performance against Colorado, I was like, okay, maybe USC could change how they ran it defensively. I still don't understand why Lincoln Riley just doesn't go out and hire a freaking NFL level defensive coordinator to run his freaking defense. That way he can actually win a national title. It makes no sense to me. Because his defenses are always trash. So the end of the game against Colorado, I was like, here we go again with this shit. Like, it was incredibly frustrating to watch. They couldn't get a single stop on 3rd and 4th down. They deserved to win that game by 40, and they won by a score.
Yeah.
So that's why USC is not there, and that's why Oregon absolutely deserves to be above USC in the AP rank. I go Washington because I love Penix. The weapons are actually more potent than USC's weapons. The 3 receivers are all going to be NFL talent draft picks. McMillan, I believe it's Polk, Jalen Polk, and Adunze, of course. So the 3 receivers are just off the charts. The offense is insane. They're unstoppable. I really do worry about this defense strenuously because they're not good defensively, much like the USC teams, but I do think they are better defensively than the USC teams, and I cannot wait for that Washington USC game. I cannot wait. It's going to be so good.
Yeah, Washington, USC, Washington, Oregon, like all these great Pac-12 games are going to be awesome. USC, Notre Dame is going to be fun too. No, I was going to say the only thing that Washington kind of has going for them defensively that like you don't see with like USC is does he not have any sacks? Oh, he does. Is they don't have a great secondary, which is kind of rare. They're not great overall defensively, but they do have a pass rush, like an NFL level pass rush duo of Braylon Trice and how do you say that? Tupuola Fatui, Zion
Oh,
Tupuola
yeah.
Fatui. Yeah, so they do have a pretty solid 1-2 pass rush duo, so they at least have that, right? So like occasionally they'll probably get a sack or 2 and like push a team out of range from a first down, even if they pick up 18 yards on the drive. So they'll make like a couple stops at least. So with their potent offense, of course, they can make that happen. Yeah, no, I agree with you. That I just wanted to mention, like for at least Washington, at least they have that. USC, their defense is just genuinely really bad. Like I watched them play Arizona State. They had like 10 sacks in the game. They were playing the 4th string quarterback for Arizona State. and they still gave up like almost 30 points, and it took them till like late in the fourth quarter to put that game away against Arizona State. Like,
Yeah,
so
no
like
problem.
their defense is a big issue. Their offense is good enough to win them all the games that they should win, but in the big time moments, I think their defense will probably let them down.
Exactly. It's happened for the past few years, so it's like um, it's broke. They need to fix it, but they refuse to. So why would I change my rankings if they refuse to fix their defense? Then my fourth spot is between Oregon, Georgia, and Ohio State. I think your Oregon at 4 is incredibly valid. The way they dismantled Colorado, I think they are the most all-around team in the Pac-12. Even though I chose Washington over them, just because I think Washington offensively could just outpace Bo Nix in this offense in a head-to-head matchup, um, and just put more points on the board, which is what wins you games. Um, I do really like this Oregon team. I'm not a big fan of Dan Lanning. I think his style is really interesting. It's very unique. He's incredibly aggressive in going for on fourth, going forward for 2, in fashions that I haven't really seen before and is really rare. He's very analytics driven when it comes to that, and sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm gonna go Georgia at 4. Um, it's just based off previous reputation. They've not played good football, so when they lose, I think they drop hard when they lose a game, like hard, because it'll be a telltale sign of how they barely won the previous games. I'm honestly thinking they dropped to 7 or 8, and you could probably see Notre Dame be ranked above Georgia in 2 weeks if Georgia loses one of these games that they honestly need to win out. Because I think if Georgia loses, Notre Dame vaults them because they'd have a more impressive loss due to strength of schedule, things like that. So, yeah, Georgia at 4. So then my top 4 is Michigan, Texas, Washington, Georgia, and then 5 I would probably have Oregon. So, yeah, that's gonna do it for it. Anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Um, no, I don't think so. I should say like there are well, I guess the only other thing I would say is like there's definitely some like a deeper field of top 25. Like I feel like a lot of the 10 to 20 teams are more competitive this year comparative to the top 10. But like
Yep.
some of these undefeated teams, like no offense, but North Carolina and Washington State, my own opinion too. Miami, Duke, or Miami, Kentucky, Missouri, like those undefeated teams, they'll have good years. They'll be competitive with top teams, but they're not gonna
They're
pull
not
off
elite.
some. None of those
Yeah.
teams are gonna turn into last year's TCU. Like they're not gonna do that. So just in case anyone was wondering, they're not gonna do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's your entire CFB overlook. Washington State. Um, go tune in Saturday night um, and listen to the Cougar broadcast that Luke will be doing in LA for the UCLA game. For some reason, UCLA is -3. It makes no sense. Um, and you're gonna go watch Washington State beat up on UCLA. So tune into that game. Luke will be calling that on Facebook Live. Um, go hit him up on Instagram. His thing will be down in his tag will be down in the description. That's for everything Hurdle Podcast, HRDL Podcast on Instagram. We post every time we go live with a new video, and then Spotify is Hurdle Sports. And yeah, subscribe, like the video. We do also at the end, so we're not self-promoting early on like those scrubs. So thank you for coming on, Luke. It's been an absolute pleasure. Luke Bailey, CFB. Peace, guys.